Bfree webinar with Kerrie Phipps. So Kerrie Phipps she's a good friend of mine that I met on the East Coast quite randomly, and we were at a professional speaking gig together, and we just got chatting, and she had this concept that was sort of went a little bit against the norm, and it was about do talk to strangers, which was breaking the taboo of things that we've been taught growing up, and not or having that fear of talking to strangers, and we've almost lost that ability to connect with people naturally. So what I've got her on the webinar for is just to share with you her story, and she's got an asking model which she uses to really help people sort of just connect with randoms and strangers authentically. And then she's going to use an example of network marketing, because it's about connecting with people within their networks and either sharing something that's worked for them, or sharing some tools or advice, or even some self-development, some learning. And then she's going to give us an action tool or something that we can take away from this and really put into practice next week, and see if we can really get out there and get outside our comfort zone. So on behalf of Bfree, Kerrie, I'd like to welcome you.
Thank you, Rory. It's really cool to be here with you across the continent.
Absolutely.
So we have a great conversation every time we connect, and it was delightful when I first met you to get you up on stage to demonstrate a talking to strangers moment. Sometimes it's the most unexpected connections that can have extraordinary consequences. So one thing that I really love to share with people is just to be open and curious about the world around them and the people around them, because then we're really open and free. I love that your organization's called Bfree, because then we're free to connect, we're free to be ourselves, and we're free to make great discoveries. So I think you wanted me to start with my story, which I can skip over sometimes, but it's so important, because people look at me and say, oh, but you're so confident. And I think, oh no, maybe I've just been a little braver, but I know what it's like to be feeling very shy and inadequate and lacking confidence and feeling like the least professional, the least educated, the least adequate person in the room. And I'm sure that a lot of people have walked into a function and felt like, they're the least or the youngest. And we forget that so many other people feel like that. So I've grown up in a family of connectors, and I think probably as a child I was, and I think most of us are. I think that whether you're taught to talk to strangers, not to talk to strangers or not, like I wasn't. My parents never said don't talk to strangers, but they taught me how to connect. They taught me to be welcoming and generous, and they modeled that. We sometimes had strangers for Christmas dinner or Sunday lunch or whenever. And we went hot air ballooning, and we went on ocean-going yachts with strangers because they said, hey, do you want to come for a ride? And Dad was like, oh, yeah, because Dad would just have a great conversation with somebody. So I think connections, and you said earlier when we were chatting, we're born to connect, and that's so true. But we just have all these voices in our head that limit us, whether it's somebody else's voice saying, don't talk to strangers. And I know adults say it to each other sometimes, and I just go, really? No, do. That's why I wrote this. Do talk to strangers, because we've really got to push against that sense of pulling back. So I could share so many stories about my family and all the connections that we've made, and then all my own stories as well. But in the time that we have, well, I'll just say go to the blog, kerriephipps.com, because there's stories of connection there. And actually, Rory, I forgot to tell you about this, but Do Talk to Strangers is a Facebook group. Do Talk to Strangers, how to connect with anyone, anywhere. And people are sharing their stories there. And I noticed today somebody shared about a little photo from the beach, and there was people and dogs, and they commented that dogs are great connectors. And I think that's great. So, we can keep sharing stories, and it's a really good thing to do because we can inspire each other. So you wanted to, feel free to interrupt me at any time, but
no, that's okay. I'll let you freestyle. But the next thing we're going to talk about was the asking model that you've got in your book, and you briefly touched on it before, and I think it's a great acronym. And I don't know, maybe use the example of talking to someone on a train, because we often get caught in that situation where we're sitting next to someone with their iPhone headphones in, and everyone's looking at the floor. So I think that's the example you used with me the first time we met, and I thought it was quite interesting. So feel free to share that.
Yeah, okay, great. And, you've reminded me, just the other day I was talking to a girl, I think she was about 20 or 21 on the train in Sydney. And she said, I'm really happy to talk to strangers. I like to. And I just think that people don't want to talk to me. But I'm going to take my headset out when I'm not on the phone so that people can see that I'm available for a conversation. And that's actually what happened. That's how we started talking. And we just make these assumptions. Nobody wants to talk to me. Everyone's busy with their technology. And for some people they are. For some people they're trying to avoid eye contact. There's actually a study I mentioned in the book called Mistakenly Seeking Solitude, which was a research done in the US. And they interviewed people on trains, and they sent people on to, get out of their comfort zone and talk to people. And those people reported a much more enjoyable train trip. And they expected that they would have enjoyed their time more if they'd finished their crossword or, read the book and stuck to themselves. But mostly they had a really, really enjoyable trip. And that totally makes sense to us. But we think that those great conversations are few and far between, or that we're not good at those conversations, but maybe somebody else is. But, I just dare you this week to have a conversation with somebody on a train and, just look for a friendly face and be the friendly face as well. So here's the asking model. I'll just pop it up here for a minute. So you can see A is for awareness. So it's about awareness of yourself and awareness of others. So sometimes we can be so busy, we're not even aware of ourselves. We're not aware that we might be feeling anxious or, sometimes, you're not even aware that you're hungry. You just think you're just getting cranky. Well, I don't know if you get cranky or hangry, some people say, because we're not paying attention to what our body's telling us. And when we can just take a breath, tune in, what's my body, what's the emotional response? Am I just nervous? Am I uncertain? And, maybe you can just ask a question to manage uncertainty, like, excuse me, do you mind if I sit here? Or, excuse me, do you have the time? Like, do I have time to have a conversation? Or, there's a whole lot of questions that we can ask just to manage uncertainty. But just be aware of how you feel. And you might be feeling a bit shy. And then we look at awareness of others, and you might see that other people might not be comfortable to connect. So if you can engage your empathy and think, how can I make this person feel welcome? Then you're aware of yourself and you're aware of the others, and then you can make a great connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Oh, I thought, have we lost internet? As we did earlier. So it's just, there's a whole chapter on it, so I'm just trying to condense it. But, just take a moment to be aware, to check in with yourself and with others. And the S in the asking model is start small and start with a smile. So, eye contact is the first thing. If you just look up and look around, I think people can get into the habit of just looking down or looking at their phone or just, avoiding eye contact, looking up at the ceiling. But if we just look down or look across at somebody and just be ready to smile, it's amazing how much can be conveyed in a brief moment of eye contact. I noticed this on Anzac Day, on the trains and as we're marching in the city streets. People want to make eye contact because it says, I see you, and we're in this together. So maybe we're in this together, like on a crowded train, and you look across and everyone's like looking at their phones or looking at the floor. But when you look across and you see somebody, there's kind of like this understanding, like, wow, it's really full today, or, that you're sharing something. And that can just be an opportunity to open a door of conversation. So, it's a two-way street. Some people will just look away when you do that, and that's okay. Don't take it personally. One of the questions I often get is, but once you've smiled and, you've made eye contact, you've smiled, what then? Like, because it's awkward. How do you start a conversation? So the first thing is just be okay with feeling awkward. Being awkward is just a human thing. Anytime we're trying something new or stepping into a new experience, there can be a moment of uncertainty, of awkwardness. But if we just go, okay, I'm just going to be okay with awkwardness. Maybe I need to just say that. Say, this might be awkward, but can I just ask you about where you got that amazing handbag from? Or they're really cool shoes. Can I ask you where you got them? Or that book looks really interesting. Do you mind me asking? And so, permission is, underpins the whole asking model. Permission and curiosity. That's why asking is such a powerful word. Because asking a question, rather than just saying, what's the time or what are you reading, to say, can I ask you about that? It's opening a door, literally in the other person's brain. They've got a choice. Do I engage in this or do I not? It's less confronting to just start a conversation without a question. So just asking permission and can be a really nice small start, and just be comfortable with awkwardness because you often can move past that very, very quickly. And because the other person that you're talking to, even if there's a lull in conversation, they might be the one that steps in and fills it because they feel awkward too. But it's okay, feel awkward together. Can we do that?
We can.
It doesn't last long. And the K in the asking model is keep going with quality questions. So by that, I mean questions that take the conversation forward and upward. So positive kind of questions. So, if you ask somebody about something that they're wearing, or maybe the dog that they're with, something that's going to put a smile in their face, something that says, I've noticed you and I've noticed something creative or interesting about you, then that lights them up. We love to be acknowledged. And it's just when we're in a happy space, then we're happy to continue the conversation, unless we've got to rush off, and people will generally say so. But just asking something, you don't know where it's going to go, and be okay with that as well. So, I've said to somebody on a train, like, wow, I love those earrings. They're really unique. And they're like, oh, I got them in Paris. And it's like, wow, I haven't been to Paris yet. What was your favorite thing about the trip? And so people are talking about things that they're really happy about. And so they like you and when you listen and you're interested in others, which is actually the I in asking, be interested in others and interested in what they're interested in. So sometimes that's a choice, because we might think, well, I haven't been to Paris and I don't really care. But it obviously matters to this person. So if we can just tune into that and ask, what was the best thing about that, then that just continues the conversation moving forwards. Because, and just to show you the opposite of that, if you say something like, isn't this weather shocking, or what about this thing going on in politics, the conversation quickly takes a dive. And if somebody's got like a bad news story, have you noticed that somebody else has got a worse one? Like, people always look to kind of better the story. So if this is horrific, then they're like, oh, well, this is even more horrific. So it's the same with good news. This is really good. And then someone goes, oh, and this is really good. And then it just continues the conversation forward. So that's the kind of keep going with quality questions. And I've got a whole lot of examples of questions. But yeah, that's kind of that in a nutshell. And natural confidence. This one, I love this, because when I first was writing this into the book and mentioned it to a friend, and they said, but I don't have natural confidence. And the book is for people like me. And I said, but you do, because I saw you the other day having a great conversation with this guy who we both know is not a great conversationalist. So I saw you both having a fantastic time. And he said, oh yeah, that's because we're talking about Spanish and I'm learning Spanish, and he knows all this stuff, and they had another interest in common as well. And I said, so what I saw was your natural confidence at work. When you're talking about stuff that lights you up, then it's easy to be confident. When you talk about stuff that you know, and I think this is really important. You mentioned network marketers before, and entrepreneurs in any kind of field, but particularly network marketers, they might know something about the products. They know that it works for them. They know that that they love the opportunity that they've stumbled across, but they mightn't know enough, and so then they can feel really pressured to know stuff, and so the confidence takes a dive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
When you feel like you have to know stuff. Same with public speakers. If you're talking about stuff that stuff that is your experience, stuff that lights you up, that's easy to talk about. But if you're trying to say something like somebody else would say it, if I'm trying to sound like you because I just think that you sound so eloquent when you speak, then I'm putting pressure on myself. And again, that comes back to awareness. What's going on in my head? What's the conversation in my head? If I'm trying to be like somebody else or trying to know what somebody else knows, then I'm just tripping myself up. We can just be ourselves and be okay with what we know, with what we don't know. We can always say, I actually don't know enough about that aspect of it. Can I find out for you and get back to you? There's no shame in not knowing something, but sometimes we expect to. Yeah. And G is for gratitude, because and I love that that's at the end, because I like to complete the conversation with gratitude, and we're not completed yet, but that reminds me to say thank you so much again for having me here with you. But gratitude opens doors. And so maybe a challenge for this week is when you go through the checkout at the supermarket, when you get petrol, when you do one of those things that you just kind of do every few days or every week and don't think much about it, look at the person who's serving you in the eye, smile at them and say, thank you so much. And you'll often see they really light up, because there could have been 50 people ahead of you that have not expressed any gratitude. And especially if you can express gratitude in a way that's the word significance coming to mind, but I want another S word, specific. So if you can say thank you for something specifically, like, thank you so much for your effort. Thank you so much for helping me with that. Thank you so much. It looks like you've got such a busy day here. You're acknowledging the person, you're putting value on them, and they so appreciate it. And so that's just a quick interaction going through the checkout, and there's probably not time to have a further conversation because there's people behind you. But just to practice, just connecting with people beyond the basic interaction. So on a train, you might have more time, just to say, it might be, do you mind if I sit here? Thank you for making space for me, or, thank you for chatting. But find something to thank people for. And it's amazing how that is a door opener as well. But you sent me a couple of questions that people had sent in for this call, Rory. First of all, do you have any questions about the asking model that I've just kind of zipped through like really quickly? I mean, it's about this much of the book.
I think it's a great model, and you've touched. I think we mentioned before. There's a book by Dale Carnegie called How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I read it today, and it touches on pretty much everything you're talking about, but you've just done it in such an eloquent way that makes it really simple. So you complement each other quite well, and that's a Bible that I think has been used in business, based on things that Napoleon did back in the day. So there's a lot of commonalities and real simple things like smile, remember people's name, and just having that genuine interest in people rather than being interesting. So I think that's really good, Kerrie. But one thing I was going to ask as well was, why do you think that people aren't talking to each other anymore? Is it that we're too busy? Is it that we've just got so much internal dialogue? Is it because our to-do lists are far too big? What do you think it is?
I think we can blame technology, and that's kind of a handy distraction. But I think people have always felt awkward, because at my book launch, a lady came along who worked in Ireland years and years ago, and she's probably about 60 now. But she said when she was a young woman, she worked in this big building where she'd get into the lift every morning and say good morning, to all the people that were kind of jammed in there. And people were just looking at the floor. And she was telling me that it's not about people just looking down at their phones and hiding with their phones, but it's always been the case where people have just avoided connecting with people because they feel awkward. They don't know what to say, so they just don't say anything. and then they have, it seems that it's worse now. I think we have more opportunities to hide because we can say, I'm too busy to talk, or, people are doing a lot of work on aeroplanes. There's there's not a lot of conversations going on planes because people have got their work, And, you know, like the gentleman I met recently, they have their book there in order to avoid people. I think people are tired and busy, and it is an effort to connect with people, but it's such a small effort. It's like it takes this much energy, but it actually gives you this much energy, and people don't realize that. So I think if we can, you know, just make that little effort and then see what response we get from it, not just the response from the other person, but how we actually enjoy the interaction.
Yeah, and I think that story you were telling me before about how your grandma and your granddad met. I think, do you want to share that briefly, because that ability to open a conversation, which might not have happened, created such a ripple effect that you couldn't even measure the magnitude of it.
That's right. That's right. So I shared this story at my grandma's funeral the other day, and I shared it in my blog. So that's on kerriephipps.com under Grandma's Inspiring Attitude. So during World War II, Grandma went to a dance to meet up with a young man who actually enlisted, and so he wasn't able to go to the dance. Granddad went to the dance to meet another girl, and then she didn't turn up. But they started dancing together. They just met and connected. And there was an African-American soldier who was, you know, asking different girls to dance, and they all refused him. And Grandma said she was so disgusted with them, and which is interesting, because it was almost fashionable to shun him. Like, racism was just so common then. You know, the African-American soldiers were not really welcomed by a lot of Sydney when they came in. So, and Aboriginal soldiers who served in World War II were not even acknowledged. So it was very commonplace for people to have that attitude, but Grandma was disgusted, and so she danced with him, and then he bowed politely, and then he left the hall. And the Aussie soldiers all applauded Grandma, and they commended her. And so I was reading this story out the other day just before the funeral to a nurse who was visiting, and Granddad said, and if she hadn't danced with him, I wouldn't have danced with her again either. And it wasn't even until later that afternoon I just thought, oh my goodness, if she didn't dance with him, I wouldn't even exist. You know, and 21 great grandchildren wouldn't exist, 17 grandchildren, and my mum and her brothers. So that was pretty outstanding that that Grandma talked to a stranger and danced with a stranger who nobody else would. So,
and it's amazing to think how many opportunities or ripple effects could have been created by that one conversation in the morning on the train, or, you know, taking that 2 minutes to talk to that person in the shopping centre, or, you know, having the courage to go and talk to that girl or that guy that you've always wanted to talk to. You know, like, it could start a ripple effect in such a positive way. But do you think fear of rejection is something that really stops us from getting outside our comfort zone, or what do you think keeps us in our shell and stops us from really talking to people?
Yeah, it's like, because, you know, the brain actually responds, you know, to a social threat in the same way as a physical threat. So your brain is just like, get me out of here when something goes wrong in the social world. So we're kind of terrified that somebody might scowl at us and walk away. And it's like, really? Does it really matter? Because even if somebody doesn't want to talk to us and we're socially rejected, yes, it's uncomfortable and it's not nice, but it's worth the risk, because that happens such a small percentage of the time. And, you know, most times, and people who read in the book who are, you know, self-confessed introverts, they say that they just love the conversations they're having, because most of the time they smile and say good morning, and it turns into something bigger and better than they expected. And so it's turned into, you know, business opportunities. It's turned into connecting people with other people. And, you know, we just love that. Like, the brain loves making connections. And so whether it's a physical connection, like I've connected with you and we're having a great conversation, or I've gone, oh, Rory, there's someone you've got to meet in Perth, actually. He's mentioned in the book, and he is a big issue seller. And I wanted to tell that story, but we'll save that for later. But you love to connect people with other people. We just love seeing connections happen, you know, because our brain is a connection machine. It's constantly making connections. So totally worth the risk.
Yeah, I think that's a great sentiment. Just being mindful of time, Kerrie, we'll get you to maybe plug through those questions. But like we were mentioning before, there seems to be this movement with they call it, the business of the 21st century, which is network marketing, which is basically everyday people sharing everyday things, whether it's a product or an opportunity, or whether it's a tool or whatever it is. But maybe using that as a bit of a model for these questions. What were the questions that got asked, and what would be your response to that if you were sort of promoting this interconnectedness between people?
Yeah, so I think these questions that people sent you are from people who are in the network marketing industry, aren't they? Or so some would be new, some would have been in it for a while.
Yes.
Yeah. So some people were asking how to connect authentically, and I'm going to tie this into the next question, which was how to connect without a perceived agenda. And like I said at the beginning of the book, just put your business goals to the side for now, and you don't have to let go of them completely. But in terms of just connecting with people, actually let go of your agenda. Because when we walk into like a networking function, or we get on the bus, or wherever we are, and if we're just kind of looking around like, who's my next client, then we miss who's the next big encourager in my life, or who's the biggest connector. I was actually speaking at the Institute for Professional Speakers on the weekend, and then people started sharing their talking to strangers stories. And one girl from Perth said that on a flight back from Sydney to Perth, she sat down next to an older lady who said hello, and it was the older lady that started the conversation. She has referred so much work to this girl, and especially old. Like, I love old people. They have such a vast experience, and amazing networks, but they can be taken for granted. People just dismiss an old lady or an old man. But if you connect with them without agenda, you have no idea the doors that they could open for you. So it's about just connecting with people, and coming back to the asking model, being interested in others, and letting go of, I have to get a sale now, or I have to get them to come to an event, or I have to do this, because that kind of limits your thinking and limits your sense of possibilities, and you just don't see things that people offer. In drama, they talk about an offer. Somebody gives you an offer. They might say something that you can make a connection with. But if you're so intent on getting somebody down the path that you want them to go to, you can miss what they're saying or what they're asking. So while it's great to have your business goals, when you connect with a person, just be there for them. Just be there to serve. And I know that a lot of people in network marketing, they love the opportunity, they love the business, they love the products that they have, and they want to share them out of a place of service. But service can get sort of pushed to the side with goals or targets. Does that make sense? So it's about bringing that service back to the conversation and just being there in the moment without expectation of this has to turn into something specific or particular.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned it before, but often it might not be the person you talk to that opens a door for you. It might be the friend of a friend of a friend that has a common interest in what you're doing, and that could then perhaps become just a genuine connection. It could become a relationship. It could even become a business partner. And I think that's a great way to look at it, is just to connect authentically and then just see where it takes you.
Yeah, absolutely. And which leads me to the next question, which is like, how to get out of the comfort zone and take the first step. It's like, just do it. Because when you start to connect, and that comes back to start small, just start at the checkout, just smile at people, and just, excuse me a second. And start small, because then you'll find that it's quite addictive. There's a lot of people who read in the book who weren't talking to strangers at all, and now they're just, in the joy of it, they're just connecting everywhere. And I found that even myself, like, I've been talking to strangers for years, and extraordinary things have happened. And so that's actually why it turned into a book, because people were saying, how do you have these conversations? How are you getting international speaking gigs because you talked to a lady on a plane on a Friday night when you just were tired and didn't think the conversation would go anywhere. But, you know, it's like this stuff happens. But I'm so much more aware of it now. So I'm talking to strangers more like on trains and planes and everywhere. And sometimes when I feel tired and feel like, you know, I could just sit here and write, or I could just close my eyes. But I think, oh, I'll just say hello first. You know, so just be curious about the world around you. And this last question that was sent in that I think is just beautiful. How to connect and make people feel special even after you leave. And that actually reminded me of, you can get these little cards from, there's a little store downtown that has these cards, and they're like gratitude cards or different things, and you pop them open and they've got a little quote in them. And there's a passenger on the coach that my brother drives from Dubbo to Broken Hill, and she sometimes leaves them on the seat for the bus drivers, and they don't see it until after she's gone. But that certainly makes them feel special after they've left. You know, leaving a little note of thanks, or, you know, sometimes I'll connect with people and just say, you know, you've reminded me of an article that you'd probably love to read. Would you be happy for me to send it to you? So, you know, you can keep in touch. People are often, if you've had a great conversation, even if it's only a few minutes, they're often quite happy to swap contact details so that you can send them something of value. So again, it comes back to serving people. And if you make it about others, then yeah, you don't know where those opportunities will take you.
That's so awesome, Kerrie. Now, we're running out of time. So what I might do, just to finish off, first of all, thank you so much. Like, you've touched on so many really important points, and just simple things that we can do just to get out of our comfort zone and start connecting naturally again. I think we've all experienced it where we've been in flow and, you know, we haven't been in our head about things, and we naturally just connect and help people. But for whatever reason, life gets in the way, or we start to let that negative self-talk sort of take over, or we get really caught in our comfort zone, or whatever happens. So I'm sure there's something in there for somebody just to take that next step and get them going on the right track. But we were talking about having something that we could action at the end of this webinar. So something that we could actually, you know, challenge people to do. And we came up with the idea of, see, in the next week, just, you know, whether it's just logging it in their journal or in a group that they're in, or if they're part of a company or something, they can just log down, you know, how many strangers they've talked to each day. And we talked about the 3-3-3 model. So even just set yourself a goal of just, you know, if you're that way inclined, or you can just do it off the cuff if you like, but, you know, talk to 3 new people a day. And see if you can figure out 3 problems that you can solve, and maybe connect those 3 people up with 3 people. And then even doing something, 3 nice things, or paying forward 3 nice gestures in that go-giver attitude for someone. And often that's the relationship building, that's a foundation for business. So is that something that you'd recommend?
Oh, absolutely. I think especially journaling it, like taking note of things, like, you know, first of all, get out of the house. Even if you've got like a day off or whatever, go for a walk around the neighborhood and acknowledge somebody for their garden. But come home at the end of the day, just write down, who did I connect with today? What were those moments? And if you've got a lot of people around, then maybe make notes throughout the day, because sometimes it's just like one amazing conversation after another. Yeah, but make note of it and see, what is the conversation in your head? What makes the conversations easy? And what are the ones that tripped you up? Because you might realize that, you know, you were thinking about, how can I tell my story here? You know, like I'm listening. Well, I'm trying to look like I'm listening, but I'm not. I want to share my story. You know, you just start noticing your thinking and noticing what works and what doesn't. But I love that 3-3-3 model. So yeah, connect with at least 3 people and just make note of it. Help 3 people make connections. And sometimes it might not be connecting somebody to somebody else. It might be connecting them to a resource, or it might be connecting them to an answer that they're looking for. And to do that without strings attached, and just let the relationship develop. See where it goes. Yep. But I'd love, people will probably tell you, people in your group can let you know what their results are. And also in Do Talk to Strangers, the Facebook group, people can come there and share this you, which would be great.
Well, what I might do, Kerrie, we'll finish up there, but thank you so much for taking the time, and here's my gratitude to you for obviously on Mother's Day sharing your story, and I know that it's been a really it's been a busy and a bit of an emotional week for you, so I really do appreciate you taking the time to come share this with us, and I'll save this tool for other people to use, and we'll action that task and see how many strangers we can talk to this week, and take our iPhone earplugs out, start looking at people in the eye and smiling and seeing where the conversation goes. It might create another ripple effect where it creates another 25 grandchildren 80 years down the track. You never know. So
yeah, you might
but yes,
generation or somebody from a different generation, but don't judge.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. And if you want to post up as well your Facebook group page, I'll share that with our group and anyone that's interested. And obviously, Kerrie's got a great book, Do Talk to Strangers, which you can check out, and you can get into this in a lot more detail. But obviously, the way that you're going to learn how to do this is, like you said, is just start small and just go do it. Just go talk to people. We're born to connect, and as soon as we get out of our head with things, it just starts to happen naturally.
Yeah, and I just want to say I made the book easy to connect with as well, because everyone is busy, and it is sometimes it's hard to read, but we made it really easy layout. We've got drawings in there, actually from a Western Australian artist, David Hooper. But yeah, we've
there
made
you go.
But it's so practical, and I'm getting amazing testimonials and little comments coming into the Do Talk to Strangers group on Facebook, which is really cool. So yeah, it's a game changer. Let's get out there and really connect and cheer people on and serve the world. So
do talk to strangers.
Yeah, do talk to strangers. Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much, Kerrie. I'll keep in touch, and I'm sure I'll see you on the flip side on the East Coast at some stage. But that's it from us, and thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Bye, Rory.
Bye.